Exports rebound in June to reach a fresh record of almost $60 billion for the month, up over 4% on year, driven by demand for chips and cars. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Wednesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's July 2nd here in Seoul. I'm Sunhee. Today we touch upon the latest events on the economic front here in South Korea. For this, I have Lee Ji-hoon with international news agency Reuters here in the studio. Ji-hoon, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Ruy Valdes with Spanish news agency EFE Spain. Ruy, as always, it's great to have you here.
A pleasure to be here.
Right, Ji-hoon, we will start with you. And before we talk about exports, Ji-hoon, let's first start with the rally that the Korean stock market has been witnessing in recent days, especially last week.
Yeah, the KOSPI rose above a key milestone of 3,000 last month, and for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic, and ended the month with a gain of nearly 14%, which was the biggest since November 2020. The rally was driven by post-election policy ops, as political uncertainty was resolved after the snap presidential election on June 3rd, which ended 6 months of leadership vacuum. President Lee Jae-myung, who won the election, has pledged to boost the domestic stock market with his so-called KOSPI 5,000 pledge, which includes the revision of the Commercial Act to better protect minority shareholders, along with other market reform measures. Lee has also vowed to win a promotion to develop market status by a global index provider, MSCI. And his vice finance minister said yesterday his government will prepare a task force to address the issue. President Lee said yesterday financial markets have become a substitute to the property market for investors, and the trend should continue in the country. Last month's stock market rally was led by financial stocks, especially securities firms, because there were hopes that stock investment will become more popular among South Koreans during President Lee's administration. And technology stocks also rallied last month, especially those related to artificial intelligence and stable coins, because President Lee has vowed to boost investment in those sectors as well. President Lee created a new job called AI Secretary and appointed an expert from Naver to the job. And he also appointed blockchain expert to his chief policy secretary, raising optimism around those sectors.
Right, and staying with this strong optimism, South Korea's consumer confidence rate soared last month, that is June. Again, what are the figures there and the factors behind them?
Right, after months of economic anxiety and political upheaval, South Korean consumers seem to give signals of optimism. The consumer index, rose to 108.7 in June, which means up 6.9 points from May. It's the highest level since June 2021, and is the second consecutive month above the neutral 100 mark, which means that there's more optimists than pessimist people in terms of consumption. There are several reasons why experts interpret that this happened, which is a boost driven by the June 3rd election of the new president after all the upheaval related to the imposition of the martial law. And, well, there's a renewed trust in leadership and economic direction. The new president Lee Jae-myung has been promoting two supplementary budgets. One already did, and now one is being revised. And this has, consumers have interpreted this as a strong policy commitment to revive growth and protect livelihoods from the new administration. And there are also other indexes that give consumers a higher sense of stability. Expected inflation for the next year fell to 2.4%, and it's also similarly expected for the next 3 and 5 years, which makes consumers think that the price will remain stable. Even though there's this optimism, it could be also temporary, because as we would speak during the show, there are big factors that could affect negatively the consumer's perspective. The Central Bank of Korea warns of uncertainty from the U.S. tariff policy, which next week will be an important deadline. And the ongoing Middle East conflict also could affect consumer sentiment.
Right, indeed. And before we touch upon the tariffs, then, June, as I mentioned at the start of this session, on the trade front, South Korea's exports rebounded in the month of June. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular finding and the factors fueling it?
Yeah, data came out yesterday, and it shows South Korea's exports rose 4.3% last month. And that comes after exports fell in May for the first time in 4 months because shipments to the US and China fell more than 8% due to tariff uncertainty. In June, exports of semiconductors jumped 11.6% to a record high, leading the headline figure higher because thanks to a strong demand for artificial intelligence. But the breakdown of data showed exports in other sectors remained weak due to ongoing uncertainty over U.S. tariffs. Exports to the U.S. fell 0.5%. There was third straight month of decline, and the exports to China also dropped 2.7% last week. By product, exports of cars rose 2.3%, but that was thanks to strong demand for electric vehicles in Europe. But those car exports to the United States, they still fell. They dropped 18%. There were also signs that South Korean automakers were increasing production in the United States, as exports of auto parts rose 2.4% last month. Among other products, steel products and home appliances, they also fell 8% and 15.6% due to U.S. tariffs. So there has been some divergence between tech sector and non-tech sectors, and also divergence between U.S. shipments and non-U.S. shipments. After the data release, South Korean trade minister said uncertainty or volatility of U.S. tariff policy will likely persist in the second half of this year. And economists also said it was too early to say exports have bottomed out, because South Korea said earlier this month that it will need more time to negotiate tariff deal with the U.S. past the July 8th deadline. So which means uncertainty will persist for at least a couple more months. Yeah.
Right, and I guess the backdrop of uncertainty, June, I understand inflation here in South Korea climbed last month. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, consumer prices rose 2.2% over the year in June, and that was the fastest since January. And it was for the first time in several months that the inflation figure was above the central bank's medium-term target of 2%. That was because oil prices rose sharply in June because of heightened uncertainty over geopolitical tensions in the Middle East.
Right, I see. Ruy, the Trump administration, as you mentioned, its pause on reciprocal tariffs comes to an end next week. Now, that being said, how many bilateral tariff deals has the administration been able to seal? And also, what's the latest with regard to South Korea's negotiations with the U.S. with regard to its tariffs?
Yes, starting with the first part of the question, so far the UK and China had struck deals with the US in terms of tariffs. In the UK deal, US agreed to a 10% tariff cap on 100,000 British automobiles per year, plus zero tariffs on aerospace, and UK scrap duties on US beef and ethanol. In the part of China, what has been said is they established a framework to accelerate rare earth exports to the U.S. in exchange of lifted countermeasures. While this was announced, we haven't seen formally the details of this deal, so we need to really see the small letters on this before really getting to any conclusion. But those will be the most important countries that have established some kind of deal with the U.S. In terms of South Korea, we can say that the clock is ticking and Seoul tariff gamble may come down the wire. There's a huge concern because if Seoul does not get to a beneficial deal or mitigates the damage that these tariffs, the current tariffs could do, and the ones that will be reapplied next week, it will have a major blow in their economy. Last month, at the end of last month, the Trade Minister of South Korea met U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick and the U.S. Trade Representative. In that meeting, Seoul still requested the full exemption on tariffs, meaning that they want an exemption on the reciprocal tariffs, but also in the sectorial tariffs, like in automobiles and steel. If Korea doesn't get to a deal, what we're talking about is that they will have to deal with 25% tariffs on cars and steel, a potential between 35 and 50% on reciprocal tariffs on other exports by this deadline. And if this happens, let's say without any deal, the Central Bank of Korea warns that this could cut this year GDP by 0.3 or 0.4%. Just to have an idea of context, Korea exports to the U.S. make up over 18% of the total outbound trade. What experts are saying is that Seoul should expand in their negotiation to include supply chain cooperation, defense, energy, shipbuilding to get to some kind of deal. The thing is that, as we have been speaking, every country does have a very specific trade relationship with the U.S., no? And South Korea, in comparison to the other countries that struck a deal, depends much more in U.S. economy. So it makes it much more hard to, let's say, to have leverage in this sense. So what experts are saying is that they will have to give in some sectors. Still, after evaluating this calculation, they still don't think there's a compelling rationale behind the calculation, because they point out that 95% of U.S. exports already enter Korea duty-free. So that has been kind of the part that has stand out a lot when these tariffs were applied to South Korea. And in the last development on this news, there was some comments from Trump's team beforehand that gave an opening that this deadline could be even extended. The Treasury Secretary of U.S. even mentioned until September on Labor Day. But Trump recently said that he's not going to give in, he's not going to extend the deadline. As we always know, with Trump, things are very uncertain, so he could change his mind in the next couple of hours, I don't know. But basically, South Korea doesn't have another chance than to take these negotiations very seriously because of the way their export-led economy is so attached to the U.S.
Right. Ruy, as you mentioned earlier, quite a number of pundits are saying U.S. tariffs on South Korean products will hinder its GDP. Yeah. But speaking at a forum over in Portugal on Tuesday, that is yesterday, BOK Governor Lee Chang-yong actually said the supplementary budget currently proposed by the government may serve to raise the country's economic growth by 0.2 percentage point. This being said, could you tell us a bit about this second supplementary budget as proposed by the government?
Right. This, since the campaign has been the policy promoted by Lee Ji-hoon, of course, they noticed that in the first quarter, there has been the economy contracted, and so they need to stimulate consumption to promote growth. And they are also very concerned about the effects that the tariffs will have if they are implemented as we discussed. So they believe that through this second budget that they have proposed of 20.2 trillion won, it includes, well, in total it's 30.5 trillion won, but 20.2 trillion won will be directed to spending, while the rest is gonna be part of a damage control to cover tax revenue shortfalls. So taking into account the spending part, what they want to do is a universal cash handout for everybody. 51 million citizens will get this. Around 84% or most of these citizens will get 250,000 won, around $180. And in fact, I have to give Ji-hoon some kind of credit because he wrote a piece on this very helpful for today's program. I would feel bad if I don't mention him. And well, of course, in a broader economic stimulus, besides the part of giving these handouts, they want to give financial aid for construction and infrastructure, investments in AI, which has been also a part that has been highly promoted by President Lee since the campaign, and digital innovation, also support to SMEs, and that relieves programs for small businesses. The fiscal deficit of Korea will expected to reach 4.2% of GDP, and the government debt to rise 49% of GDP. Of course, there's people that are concerned because nothing is free, right? Like you're gonna pass on these huge extra budgets. But if you analyze, let's just put, well, we have to take into account that every economy is different, but to put it in a level, South Korea will be in a medium level comparing the debt of other advanced economies. But as I mentioned, maybe US has more than 100%, and then Germany has little, but we could say that in principle, South Korea would not be exaggerating its debt, but still we need to be cautious about it because they say they will cover it with treasury bonds, but at the same time, nothing is free. So that doesn't guarantee that this debt in the long term will be paid. But so far, as you were mentioning, Sunhee, the objective of these budgets are mainly to stimulate the economy, which has had a contraction and not very well, not a good performance in the first quarter, and to prepare for what could be coming with the tariffs.
Right, for sure. And Ruy, aside from that coverage by Ji-hoon for Reuters on the supplementary budget, you also covered a piece about the concerns raised by a BOK board member about financial stability here in South Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about that coverage?
Yeah, the Bank of Korea's board members have been raising concerns about financial stability in recent days, and most recently, Governor Ri Chang-yong said yesterday he was watching out for financial stability risks due to rising housing prices, especially in the capital Seoul area. House prices have been rising in recent months, especially around the capital area, on lower interest rates, as well as on expectations that there will be an upward trend under the new Liberal administration. And that has led to household debt's growth that was the biggest since September 2024 in May. That is why the government last week held an unexpected emergency meeting over household debt and announced strong measures to curb housing prices. The measures include cutting year-end loan targets for commercial banks and capping mortgage loans to the limit of 600 million won for home purchases and other regulations that are tightened on mortgages. These measures are local media reported these measures are the unprecedented and the strongest ever announced in this country. And that is being a key variable for the Bank of Korea, which has been lowering interest rates since last year to counter downward pressure on economic growth. The Bank of Korea, when it last lowered interest rates in May, said there were 4 board members who were open to another rate cut in the 3 months time frame. But now expectations are growing that the Bank of Korea will hold interest rates steady at its upcoming meeting next week because of rising concerns over household debt and the property market. On investment bank, Citi already expects the Bank of Korea's rate cutting cycle will be slower going forward, with the next cut expected in October, not after the following meeting in August, because the Bank of Korea will want to watch or wait and see to assess the impact of recent government measures announced last week.
Right, as well as, of course, like consumer prices that we just heard about today as well. Ruy, we have time for one more question. I'd just like you to touch upon the president's pick for finance and economy minister. What can you tell me about this particular person and the policies that he may shape going forward?
Yes, well, his name is Koo Yoon-chol, and he's famously known as the AI evangelist. And this is because he wrote a policy blueprint called AI Korea, and he has been promoting the AI support as a policy in all levels of government and the country. We will get into that. He's 60 years old. He's a career civil servant with deep roots in the Ministry of Economic and Finance. We could say that he's a budget expert, and this is very related to what we have been talking about. President Lee Jae-myung looked for somebody who could help him devise expansionary fiscal policy that, well, in principle, would be healthy, but at the same time, able to stimulate the economy. Also, Minister Koo is known because he drafted the 500 trillion won budget and 2 COVID-era supplementary budgets. I don't know if we can recall, in COVID-era there was many supplementary budgets that were passed on because of the emergency, of course. And Pundit said that the profile of the new minister seems like a natural lift on this pledge to achieve 3% real growth and large-scale structural reform. He has a strong record of interagency coordination and budget innovation, and he says that, well, he pledges that he will build a virtuous cycle of national development and public happiness. All this related to the support of AI research, development, and training. So they are going very strong on this. If we can see here, the president in many interventions, he has mentioned the word AI many, many times in different, let's say, scenarios. And yeah, so the vision of the new minister is a corporate vision of the country. He says he declared aim to manage the Korean economy like a corporation where citizens are the real shareholders. And he called for new growth engines and an inclusive system to share economic gains. This is more or less the profile of the new minister.
Right, it's a great ambitious plan, and hopefully it takes fruit, or bears fruit in the near future. All right, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you, Sun.
Ji-hoon, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching, and do join us again same time tomorrow.